Listener discretion is advised. Sunset, Utah, August 26th, 1982. 3-year-old Rachael Runyan is playing at a playground with her 2 older brothers right next to her family home. In an instant, Rachael is abducted in front of her 2 brothers and thrown into a man's car. 24 days later, her body was found partially submerged in a creek 20 miles from her family's home. This case has remained unsolved for 40 years. Who abducted and who murdered Rachael Runyan, and why? Welcome back to Unblurring the Unknown. I'm your host, Dominic, and I am back with a true crime story today. And it was a very interesting one that I saw as I was scrolling through the annals of Reddit, trying to come up with topic ideas, but also kind of think of something that I thought was interesting that maybe not a lot of people have heard about. But as I dug into this one actually became a pretty popular story. And I mean, obviously, I was not alive in the 1980s. But for those who were, maybe this story rings a few bells if you heard about it when this story took place. But I thought it was a very interesting one, especially being that it's been unsolved for 40 years, and it's kind of consistently always been an active case. Cold case, sure, but there's always been somebody investigating it at some time. And to top it all off, they feel like they're pretty close to solving the case, so this being an active investigation, some of the information was a little bit harder to find than others, but I felt like this story was really interesting, so that's why I wanted to cover it for this week. Now, let's get into the story and exactly what happened to Rachael Runyan. Now, that being said, today's topic is not an easy one to digest, and as I said at the beginning of the intro, that there are going to be a lot of distressing themes in this episode. And like I said, it's still an active case, and I'm just forewarning you guys before I get into it. There might be some things that are not, always the best to talk about. So I'm just giving that forewarning before I get into the nitty-gritty of the story. For those of you who are sticking with us, our story begins on August 26th, 1982. Rachael Runyan was the daughter of Elaine and Jeff Runyan, and she had 2 brothers, 5-year-old Justin and 1-year-old Nathan. Now, on the morning of August 26, Rachael and Justin asked their mother Elaine if they could take Nathan to the park behind their house. Now, this park was located next to the Doxey Elementary School and was just 15 feet from the Runyans' home. So they actually even installed a fence in between the home and the park, so that Elaine and Jeff, they felt safer that their kids would have easy access to the park. There was a gate in between it, so it was, a little safer. Now, Elaine didn't feel good about them going to the park unsupervised, as she didn't like them leaving the house without her permission unsupervised, which, I totally do not blame her in the slightest for that. She didn't like them leaving the house, but the kids begged and begged, so she allowed them to do so. And she basically said, okay, you can do that. I'm going to watch you guys from the window as I make lunch, and you guys have a great time at the park. Now, at 12:30 p.m., a man came to the park and approached the Runyan children. He talked to them for a little while and even played with the kids in the sandbox. He offered to take the kids to the local supermarket to get ice cream, to which the kids aren't sold on, and they know, obviously, stranger danger. Rachael spoke up and told the man that she actually liked bubblegum, and that the man replied that he had some in his car and that he could go get it for her. Justin told Rachael to not go with the man, as their parents have told them not to go with strangers, stranger danger, don't go with people you don't know. And then once the ruse seemed to be up for the man and he kind of knew that his cover was blown, he snatched Rachael up and threw her over his shoulder and shoved her into his car and drove off. Now, this is a little bit of sidetracking, but there's a couple conflictions on the stories that I read. One said that Rachael preferred bubblegum flavored ice cream. So like the man said, hey, I can bring you to the supermarket to get you ice cream. And she said that she liked bubblegum flavored ice cream, not bubblegum itself. Whereas another article I read said bubblegum itself. So it's not very specific on this. And I kind of saw conflicting things on the whole ice cream bubblegum thing. I just thought that was interesting. That's complete me sidetracking from the story, obviously. But I just felt like that was a little confusing. But obviously it's, this happened to a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. They're not exactly going to remember every little bit of the story. Or at least you wouldn't imagine them to. Now at 12:55 p.m., when Elaine realized that she didn't see the children on the playground anymore, she called out to them, and only Justin and Nathan came back. When Elaine asked the boys where Rachael was, they told her about what had happened with the man that approached them at the park. Now, Elaine, after hearing what the boys had told her, hoping the man actually did take her to the supermarket, she drove there first. So when it was clear that Rachael was not brought to the supermarket, Elaine called the Sunset Police Department, and reportedly the trip Elaine going to the supermarket and seeing her daughter was there only about 20 minutes or so. So it was not a very long trip. So if she decided to call the cops before she went to the supermarket, that's that 20-minute time period. That's not really a super long period of time where I don't think it would have made much of a difference. And I kind of wrestled with that for a little bit. Like, okay, why did she go to the supermarket first versus calling the cops right away? But I mean, if it's 20 minutes and it just took her 20 minutes in general, I don't think that's a long enough time to where she can just... I don't think it would make much of a difference. And as we get into the story, we obviously find out what happens. But the Sunset Police Department, obviously, they actually do a fantastic job, and they waste no time, as they set up roadblocks around town, and they set up a task force formed by multiple investigators from several Utah counties to help track down the girl. Now, this task force to help track down Rachael was led by Sheriff Brant Johnston. Now, both Justin and a 10-year-old boy who was also at the park, so he was the only other kid who was at the park the same time the Runyan kids were. This 10-year-old boy was also approached by the man at the park, and Justin and the 10-year-old boy both described the man in the same way. They described the man who took Rachael as a light-complexioned African-American in his mid-30s, 6 feet tall, medium build with a handlebar mustache, and an afro-style haircut. They also both said that he drove an older model 4-door car that was dark blue with a wood grain stripe along the sides. Now, they both said and thought that the man was lingering around the park for approximately 15 minutes before Rachael was taken. Now, this memory from the kids allowed the police to create a composite sketch of who abducted Rachael, as there was no camera footage or any other witnesses who saw the abductor. Now, Elaine and Jeff Runyan went out of their way, and they did everything they possibly could to try and find their daughter and put the word out that they were trying to find her and that this girl was missing. So after the events of August 26th, as this case generated public attention and publicity, they set at a press conference, and this press conference basically was an attempt to continue to spread media about the case, spread it to as many people as possible, get it out there, just to increase the chances of obviously getting their daughter back. Now, the Runyans felt like their daughter could have been sold, obviously in a form of human trafficking. She could have been sold, and they urged anyone who was adopting a girl in the coming weeks to make sure that they were not inadvertently adopting their missing daughter. Now, on top of that, thousands of missing persons flyers were put out. The Runyans themselves put down a $20,000 reward for the finding of their daughter, and even the town of Sunset, Utah, matched that and pled another $20,000 to the return of Rachael. Now, this is kind of where the story obviously takes the sad turn, and 24 days later, on September 19th at 5 p.m., a family traveling on Trappers Loop Road near Mountain Green, Utah, approximately 50 miles from Sunset, discovered the body of Rachael partially submerged in a creek. Her body was identified by her pierced ears and chipped front tooth, but due to an advanced state of decomposition, the coroner could not determine a cause of death. Now, obviously, 24 days later, advanced stage of decomposition. How long the abductor had Rachael is kind of a question mark. I couldn't see any article that told me if they had a guess, so on and so forth, but you have to kind of assume that, Rachael could have been, in those woods for, I'm going to say at least a week and a half, if you're doing the math. And obviously I know absolutely nothing about body decomposition or forensic science or anything of the nature, but I'm just going to continue to sit here and speculate because that's what I do. I am a professional skeptic of everything, honestly. Now, to add a sense of mystery to this case, because obviously it does not stop there. It's not cut and dry, and obviously it's still an active case, but this adds kind of a interesting twist that kind of makes it a little bit different than your pretty much cut and dry missing persons case. Now, 2.5 weeks later, after the discovery of Rachael's body, a security guard at a 24-hour laundromat located only 7 miles from the Runyans' home found a message scrawled across the bathroom wall that read, "Beware, I'm still at large. I killed the little Runyan girl. Remember, beware." And then put 3 exclamation points after beware. And then whoever wrote this message was completed with a 666 and an upside down cross. Obviously, if you know what those symbols mean, they are both related with Satanism. Now, could Satanism have played, or a satanic cult for that matter, played a role in the abduction and murder of Rachael Runyan? You will have to find out at the end. You see what I did there? I led you on to think that I was going to tell you what I thought, but no, I save my theories for the end because that's what I do, and I do not want to give away the story, obviously. I got you, though. Now, continuing on, Lieutenant Phil Olmsted of the Sunset Police Department responded to these Satanism claims, pretty much, and said that the symbols could lend an idea that the kidnapping and murder could be related to cult activity in the area. Now, is there any, besides the person who wrote the message on the wall, is there any evidence of satanic activity in Utah during the 1980s? Absolutely. There was satanic activity everywhere in the 1980s, and that's just the whole United States. So, is that a possibility? Absolutely. But, trudging on. Again, I'm not telling you what I think or my theories, but I'm trudging on. Now, the police got a lead to this case in 1989 as Lieutenant Olmsted got a tip from an informant that said Rachael was abducted to make a snuff film. Now, that being said, I'm not going to explain what that is, as it is very not okay. And if you need to have an idea of what a snuff film is, I kind of just want you to have it sit in your head for a couple seconds and just kind of think about what that possibly could be. Again, I am not going to... I'm not going to say what it is, because I like my content and I don't want anybody to take it down for me describing what that is, because it's not okay in any way, shape, or form. However, Lieutenant Olmsted felt like if there was a snuff film made with Rachael Runyan, if somebody who watched it and had tips on who sold it to them, they would not be prosecuted in exchange for finding the abductor. So they were made a compromise. Okay, if there was a snuff film made of Rachael and you received the said film, we will not prosecute you in exchange for you telling us who sold you the film to begin with. Now, that was all based off an informant, said that that's what happened with Rachael in the first place, and then I have to imagine after the abductor made the snuff film, then murdered her, and then disposed of her body. Now, this case is obviously still active, as I've mentioned, and as modern crime fighting has consistently improved, and investigators feel like they are very close to discovering who actually committed the crime. Now, in a positive light, not all of this ended negatively. In a little positive twist, I guess, the murder of Rachael Runyan spawned the creation of the Rachael Alert in Utah to help rescue missing children. Now, the 2 times the Rachael Alert was used, it worked, and both children were found alive, and it eventually got replaced with the Amber Alert, and obviously everybody knows what the Amber Alert is. Everybody's kind of, knows what the idea of an Amber Alert is. Everybody's, you get the notification on your phone with the noise. It says Amber Alert. And obviously that got rolled out nationwide. So obviously the idea for the Rachael Alert strictly for Utah didn't really make any sense to keep it when the nation was implementing Amber Alert. But this is kind of an interesting tidbit from an otherwise very sad story. Because obviously you can say that, okay, this case probably helped influence the creation of the Amber Alert. Now, onto the suspects portion of this. In October of 1989, so that same year that Lieutenant Olmstead got a tip from an informant, an inmate in the Utah State Prison was named as a possible suspect. Now, he was in prison for an unrelated aggravated assault charge, and his sister told the police that he was responsible for the killing of Rachael. Now, to kind of crumple this all up into a ball and throw it out the window, the inmate's sister later recanted much of her statements, and the sister was actually charged with obstruction of justice. So that accusation holds absolutely zero credibility whatsoever. Now, in 2019, the Utah Cold Case Unit picked up the case and determined that maybe the composite sketch of the man that they were looking for was inaccurate. Now, this takes us back to Justin Runyan. Now, Justin Runyan later confirmed this as he got older. He personally felt like the man could have been also mixed race or Hispanic and not just African American. Now, the cold case ran with this and updated the sketch. Now, they updated the sketch of Rachael's supposed abductor, and this caused a woman in 2022 to step forward and say that she felt like her uncle was responsible. Now, no names have been released from this claim, and the woman did not come forward sooner because the initial sketch was that of an African American and not someone who could be Hispanic or mixed race. Again, like I said, everything has been kept really under wraps and anonymous, and the Sunset Police Department and Utah Cold Case Unit feel like they are still very close to solving this crime today. Now, with that being said, and really no idea who the person is who got accused of doing this by the woman. Obviously, there's evidence to support that because the car that he had was a 4-door blue car with the white grain stripes on the side. That matched up, and the overall description also matched up. However, the article just said that this was an accusation. This anonymous woman came forward and said it was her uncle, and it kind of stopped there. And I couldn't really find any other updates other than that, just that the police department were saying, hey, we're really close, and we feel like we're really close. Which is good, obviously. But I feel like there's an important part to the story that leaves us without an explanation, and again, that is the claim of Satanism from the security guard at the 24-hour laundromat. Now, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, during the 1980s, Satanic Panic was big time, and the country was pretty much on whole satanic, alert. Like, everybody's a Satanist, and everybody's, supporting the devil and Satan and everything like that. And I briefly covered Satanic Panic again in the Bridgewater Triangle episode a few episodes earlier. If you haven't heard that one, really, really good one. And I believe the Satanism involved in the Bridgewater Triangle episode is a lot more substantiated than this particular case. But again, 1980s Satanic Panic was absolutely rampant across the country. So, that said, I did some research into seeing if, the whole Satanism thing was big in Utah during this time, and it was. In 1985, the Provo Daily Herald, and that is at Provo, Utah, the Provo Daily Herald ran a 12-part series. Why 12 parts? I have no idea. But they ran a 12-part series on supposed satanic activity in Utah. And in this series of articles, the Provo Daily Herald cites anonymous interviews that they conducted during this period, such as one with a teenager who claims he drank the blood from sacrificed animals, a director of a youth group who claims at least 60% of Utahns in the criminal justice system are involved in some sort of Satanism, and a Provo man who also claims his interest in Satanism serves as some sort of escapist fantasy from the real world. Now, again, why 12 parts? I have no idea. I don't know. Because after one part, I wouldn't read it, so I don't know why they felt to make 11 more, honestly. But diving a little deeper into this, I found that much of the Satanic Panic in Utah during the 80s and 90s, and in parts of the U.S., was actually caused by social workers convincing kids that they were being abused and included in rituals being conducted by daycare workers. Now, do not quote me on this, because obviously I could be wrong. I am not an expert in anything. I am definitely not an expert in the Satanic Panic in the 1980s, so do not take my information out of context. I am strictly repeating information that I have found. Furthermore, many of these claims were similar, but many believe it to be a case of somebody convincing you that something happened when in reality it wasn't. Obviously, as a child, your brain is very impressionable. You can be molded by the people around you and molded by what people tell you. Now, for a social worker or whatever to say, hey, you're being involved in, satanic cult activity because this is related with cults, or this is related with cults, or this is related with cults. It pretty much stirs that into a frenzy, and then the kids tell the parents, and then the parents freak out, or the kids become adults, and they freak out because then they realize that they were, they think that they were involved in some satanic conspiracy, and they were worshiping the devil, or whatever. It's a whole, it's exactly it is. It's a panic. It's almost like, mass hysteria. It's a made-up story that everybody kind of feeds off of, and yeah, it's a powder keg of just craziness. And I honestly, again, this is a case of, again, like I said, somebody convincing you that something happened when in reality it didn't. You were just strictly groomed to believe it. So, back to the side of the story about Rachael, and not the side of the story about Satanism, obviously. Do I think Satanism had a hand in this? I think that's hard to say. But me personally, I'm leaning towards no. Now, I think the scribbling on the wall could have been done by anyone. It didn't have to be done by the kidnapper or killer, as this case did gain national media attention, and it could have been someone trying to pull some sort of sick joke with what was going on at the time. Why somebody would think that way, I have honestly no idea. But I'm leaning towards Satanism not being a part of this, because like I said, anybody could go into the laundromat, there's a laundromat outside of Sunset, Utah. Why a laundromat? Why the bathroom wall? I don't know. But you can ask that about a lot of things that take place in everyday life that leave us without explanation. So why somebody would scribble on the bathroom wall, hey, I killed the little Runyan girl, I'm still on the loose, and then put the upside down cross and the 666, I have honestly no idea. But again, the possibility of that just being anybody because this case gained so much national media attention, I'm leaning towards that could have been anybody. It could have been somebody off the street. It could have been somebody locally, who, again, was trying to deflect, or somebody who knew the abductor themselves, or an accomplice of some sort that could have scribbled it on the wall as a deflection to get them, to get the cops off their trail and think that it was some cult, that abducted her and not human traffickers. But you could go on and on about whether or not you believe that could be the case or not. Now, usually this is the part in the episode where I'd go over theories. Now, since Rachel's body was found, there's not really many theories about what became of her. Obviously, you have the theory that, okay, she was used to make a snuff film. Obviously, child trafficking. You have the theory about kind of being used for Satanism in some capacity. If you want to call that a theory, I still don't think that's much. I don't think there's enough evidence to substantiate that as a theory. Obviously, the fact of the matter is that the killer is still large. But there's no Satanism involved. And that's just my opinion. I think it was strictly on the course of the Satanism part. I think it was finger pointing. All right, I'm going to deflect, or this is some junkie coming off the street who just wrote it on the wall as a sick joke. There's too many variables there for me to believe that it was actually the abductor who wrote it on the wall, but that's hard to say. Now, I think that this was child trafficking, and the fact that this case has remained unsolved for so long is because of the lack of witnesses, or in this case, the witnesses only being kids. Obviously, there was no other eyewitness accounts of or descriptions of the man besides the two kids that interacted with him that day, and then obviously they updated the police sketch because, but now you're talking 40 years later when this took place. So how accurate is the kid's memory to begin with? Obviously, that being a very traumatic event, I'd have to imagine that they'd remember it, but obviously you do forget little things that you might have noticed in the heat of the moment, so to speak. Now, because of that, I think that's why it's remained unsolved, because there is no camera footage. There's just very vague descriptions, and then the sketches of the man. Now, I do think that they are very close to solving this. Obviously, that they've announced that, but I still genuinely believe that. I think with the woman coming forward and saying, hey, I think it was my uncle. However, I did not come forward earlier because the original description was an African American, and my uncle happens to be Hispanic, and that is what she told reporters, and that is what she told police as well, that her uncle was Hispanic. The sketch, did not match up, and that is why she did not basically call in a tip in the first place, and that's honestly, I believe that. But again, I'm mystified by true crime, and I'm captivated by it. But again, true crime is one of those things where, especially in the case of when it has to do with a child, it's always tragic and unfortunate, and it's always very hard to talk about. However, I think as a society, it's important for us to talk about cases like Rachael Runyan's, and to talk about child trafficking and how that is so prevalent in today's society, and that how as human beings we need to be aware of that problem and come together and try and figure out a way to stop that, because kids don't deserve to be victims of things like this, and this is one of these cases where it's exactly what it is. It's sad. It is absolutely devastating for the family, and obviously for the Runyans. I hope that the killer gets, in this case, if the killer is alive, brought to justice, and they get some closure. Now, obviously, this episode was probably a little bit more sad than some of my previous episodes, but so be it with true crime. I wanted to take a different route for this week, and I hope you enjoyed basically this side of the content I plan on bringing to you all. Now, that being said, that will conclude today's episode of Unblurring the Unknown. If you don't know how to follow me or keep into the loop, you can go and turn on notifications on Spotify so you get notified every time of when I release a new episode. You can also subscribe to me on YouTube. I will also post copies of the episodes on YouTube, so in case if you don't have Spotify, you can go and check them out there. That being said, also follow me on Instagram, where I'll be posting relevant photos from each of the episodes to my Instagram page. So you can open up my Instagram page and you can say, oh, look, there is all the pictures that I posted for the Rachael Runyan episode. And they're all right there and they're all relevant to the episode. So go give me a follow there. Also, and I've said it before, you can send me topic suggestions. If there's a topic that you wish that I could cover and you want me to cover and you're like, hey, this is really cool, you should cover it, send it right on over to me. My emails are open. You can send it to me. It is unblurringtheunknown@gmail.com. And I will say that again. It is unblurringtheunknown@gmail.com. Send me those topic suggestions. Follow me on Instagram. Turn on your notifications for Spotify and subscribe to me on YouTube. I don't ask a lot, but I do ask those things. So please go and do that for me. I graciously appreciate it, and I appreciate the support. So that being said, that's going to conclude today's episode on the murder of Rachael Runyan. As sad as it is, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next one.